who's going to hold Treasury accountable for this $500 billion corporate rescue fund?
Well, you need that to help all of these companies that have a chance of not being companies anymore. We'll have stock for America. We'll take back stock for the United States. At the same time, most importantly, we'll keep those companies healthy. But we can also make incredible deals for the country so that that number will increase exponentially. I mean, it's a great thing.
The fund is about the lack of oversight. For Treasury having this unilateral authority to dole out all of this money.
Well, look, I'll be the oversight. I'll be the oversight. We're going to make good deals. We make good deals.
President Trump is volunteering to personally oversee a $500 billion fund intended to help hard-hit businesses and state and local governments. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Tuesday, March 24th. Let's dive right in. The World Health Organization says the spread of the coronavirus is picking up pace. It took 67 days from the first reported case to reach 100,000, 11 days for a second 100,000 cases, and just 4 days for a third. Here in the U.S., the numbers continue to surge with nearly 10,000 new cases reported in the last 24 hours, still with no bend in the curve in sight. President Trump is calling for a quick end to the most effective tool that currently exists to combat the virus, social distancing.
We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem. At the end of the 15-day period, we'll make a decision as to which way we want to go, where we want to go, the timing. And essentially, we're referring to the timing of the opening, essentially the opening of our country.
You said it's likely going to be weeks, not months, before you suggest easing these guidelines that you put out. Have any of the doctors on your team told you that's the right path to pursue?
We spoke to them today, and I was telling them that we have two things to look for. Don't forget the doctors. If it were up to the doctors, they may say, let's keep it shut down. Let's shut down the entire world, because, again, you're up to almost 150 countries. So let's shut down the entire world. And when we shut it down, that would be wonderful. And let's keep it shut for a couple of years. You know, we can't do that.
Where is Dr. Fauci right now? Why is he not at this briefing? Will he attend future ones?
Well, I was just with him for a long time. And he's at the task force meeting right now. We have a task force meeting. He was there.
Does he agree with you about the need to reopen the economy soon?
Well, he doesn't not agree. I mean, we had a long talk, and he understands there's a tremendous cost to our country. You know, you have almost 160 million jobs in this country now, the most ever, by far the most ever. The number of jobs, almost 160 million. So we can't turn that off and think it's going to be wonderful. There'll be tremendous repercussions. There will be a tremendous death from that. Death. You know, you're talking about death. Probably more death from that than anything that we're talking about with respect to the virus.
Okay. That 15-day period, the president is set to decide whether to relax the social distancing guidelines recommended by government experts. It ends next Monday. However, that's not stopping more and more governors from issuing stay-at-home orders as Hawaii, New Mexico, Washington State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Oregon, West Virginia, Massachusetts and Indiana join 8 other states in ordering residents and non-essential workers to stay inside. And, Joe, the numbers don't seem to match what the president is saying about, getting the country open again.
Well, I personally, and I could be wrong, I think the president's just talking right now. Whether he's blowing off steam or he's sending a signal to businesses or his supporters that run big corporations that he wants to get the economy restarted again. He's getting pressure from inside the White House, from Larry Kudlow. I know Larry, I like Larry, but Larry's not a doctor. And Larry's the guy who said a couple of weeks ago, along with Kellyanne Conway, that the pandemic was contained.
But these updates are to update people on the reality of this virus, where it is, what the numbers are, where masks are, where supplies are, where testing is.
Right.
Because people like Rand Paul walk around Capitol Hill interacting with everybody, not knowing they have the virus. A case in point example in Washington, D.C., in the Republican Party. What more do they need? We need updates. We don't need him riffing and surmising on politics during these updates. That's fine if you think he's politicizing and trying to figure out how to play the odds with this for his own political needs. But it seems like I'd rather see Dr. Fauci there. And I didn't know where I missed him yesterday.
Well, I think most people were frustrated yesterday. Really no new information that couldn't have been summed up in 60 seconds, 90 seconds at the end of that press conference by somebody else. But it's very interesting what you say about Rand Paul, because let's think about it. I keep talking about and keep just banging the drum on the importance of nationalizing our effort and throwing absolutely everything we need, everything we have into testing and expanding testing. And of course, you've got an op-ed this morning by two Nobel Prize winning economists saying that if you want to reopen the economy, you've got to test everybody. That's the only way. If you're going to do what South Korea has done, you've got to be able to do that. But I want to bring in Jonathan Lemire. And by the way, the White House they're just not making this a national priority. They're not making it a national effort. They've got to figure out how to get along with China, regardless of where this started, to get the masks, to get the other equipment. China's making like 120 million masks a day.
My Lord.
We need to figure out, again, as I've said throughout this entire process, afterwards, we'll do our after-action reports on China, on Donald Trump and everybody else. Right now, what we need to do is get those masks and help people on the front lines. But, Jonathan, help me out here. You wrote a very revealing article yesterday about the president's state of mind, but I want to go down a list of things I was just writing down as I was listening to the president. We have states shutting down. 10,000 new cases in the United States just over the past 24 hours. 10,000 new cases. U.S. numbers skyrocketing at such a rate that we're soon going to go past China as a country with the highest number of infections. Boeing, I read a report that one of their main plants yesterday shutting down. You have, as you know, U.S. airlines are now talking to the government. They're talking about shutting the airlines down, shutting down basically a virtual shutdown of all U.S. domestic flights and most international flights. And you have New York City, of course, in a deepening crisis. And your story yesterday, I understand, your story reveals very well how he's growing frustrated with social distancing protocols, which have forced the closing of Mar-a-Lago, forced him from getting out of the White House. But the president surely does understand, Jonathan, does he not, that the rallies will come later in the summer. The rallies will come later in the fall. But we haven't even begun to see we're still a week, 2 weeks away from seeing the worst of this in the United States. If we're lucky, we're not opening up in 2 weeks. He understands that, right?
It defies the advice of every medical expert around him, including Dr. Fauci. His absence yesterday simply explained is that it wasn't his turn to be out there. They're doing a rotation system. But there are reports, including in ours, that the president has grown a little frustrated with some of the attention Dr. Fauci has received and some of the criticism that Dr. Fauci has delivered in various interviews. So that's something to keep an eye on going forward. But in terms of not just the president. There are those, and Larry Kudlow is one of them, as you just mentioned. There are people within the administration who believe the health experts have gone too far with this in terms of what they've recommended in terms of shutting down the economy, and that it is delivering a mortal blow to the nation's economy and potentially the president's re-election chances. So there is a movement. It's nothing's been committed to yet, but you heard the president yesterday at the briefing. It lines up with our reporting all day long and our story that moved yesterday afternoon, that he is considering this, that it would not be a nationwide lift. There certainly would be hot spots that would still remain with these restrictions, New York City, California, Washington. And a lot of this of course, is going to be up to the individual state governors. Governor Cuomo is certainly not going to just listen to President Trump on whether or not New York should reopen for business, as the president said. But there is consideration here that when this 15 days runs out in about a week or so, that they may start to ease restrictions across the United States, because the president has been watching and worrying about the state of the economy. Now, of course, we haven't even been close to the peak yet of this pandemic here in the United States. And what will be very telling is that the physicians yesterday, Dr. Birx was on stage with him yesterday. She sort of subtly distanced herself from this proposal. She didn't endorse it. She didn't rebuke it either. What pressure will fall on her and others, including Dr. Fauci, to push this forward? But we'll say this, to sort of perhaps talk back and convince the president from doing this. To this point, though, as our story highlights, the president who's hunkered down in the White House, who's frustrated, he can't travel, he can't go to rallies, he's turned those briefings into his rally, it's his outlet with the press, that he is unsure of what to do. He's been up on the phone late at night calling advisors, sort of desperately dialing around for a good news. He's crashing White House meetings that he's not supposed to attend, forcing aides to redo their agendas, and forcing aides to perhaps sugarcoat their message. Because as we know from the beginning of this administration, the president doesn't want to hear from any sort of subordinate something that doesn't line up with his own preconceived worldview. And that includes this pandemic, such a dangerous moment. So it is possible he is not getting, Joe, the most accurate information he needs, and therefore he's forging forward with his gut, which could mean this reopening in just a week or so.
Yeah, he talked about it repeatedly yesterday at what was one of the worst updates, if that's possible. They've hit so many lows. The numbers don't match, Joe, with what the president is saying. The numbers are still spiking. They're not going down. There is absolutely no reason the president should be talking about reopening the country right now if you look at it from any logical point of view. Another person missing from that update yesterday was the Surgeon General, but his words were quite something compared to the president yesterday. This is going to be really bad, and everyone should be acting like they have the virus. That was his advice. But yet these people somehow don't make it to the stage anymore, or if they do, potentially, if you look at Jonathan Lemire's reporting, the president gets frustrated with this, with medical information, advice, guidance.
So the president and Congress and we as a society are balancing two things right now. We're balancing a pandemic, the worst public health scare, the worst public health care crisis we've had since 1918 in over 100 years. We're also balancing that with what may soon be the worst economic crisis that we've had since 1929, since the crash in 1929. Those are two extraordinary things that have to be balanced. And if you just just drive around your community from a safe distance from other people today, you will see there are still far too many people who are just not taking this seriously. Yeah. And with them not taking this seriously, that virus is spreading, the pandemic spreading. There was a story in the New York Times this morning about how one party in Westport, Connecticut, birthday party, a 40th birthday party on March the 5th, helped spread the pandemic to South Africa and across the globe. People don't understand that how quickly this spreads, how easily it spreads. And so, again, I think the president, if let us hope the president was just trying to send a signal to the markets that he's on their side. He's growing impatient, too. But, Mika, I have no doubt the numbers are going to be so bad in the coming weeks. We're in the next at least 2 weeks that the president's not going to reopen anything. He understands that because right now, again, the White House is talking with airlines about cutting off all domestic flights because they know this is getting worse.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.